right, we're going to call to order the October 3rd meeting of the West Sacramento City Council, the Redevelopment Successor Agency, and the West Sacramento Financing Authority. We're going to begin tonight, as we do each week, with the Pledge of Allegiance. So I'd like to invite our guests to join the council and the staff in the pledge, which tonight is going to be led by Mr. Don Schlee. Don, did you hear me? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. The council did meet in closed session this evening to confer with our labor negotiator regarding negotiations with Local 522, the firefighters local. No action was taken. That brings us to item 1A, which is presentations by the public on matters not on the agenda but within the jurisdiction of the City Council. As is noted on our agenda, this is a time when we City Clerk has asked us to take an item out of order, which I fully agree with, given the hour. And first, let me also note that item 8 is going to be removed from tonight's agenda at the request of the City Manager. That was an item to be taken up in conjunction with the Port Commission, and the Port Commission deferred action on it, so we won't be taking it up tonight. So before we proceed to items number 1, just in light of the hour, we're going to go directly to item 2, and then we'll return to 1A following that item. So item 2 is presentation of a proclamation recognizing the West Sacramento Little League for winning the 2012 District 6 championships. Is there a... Is there a motion on the proclamation? Second. I'm not even going to try. Madam Clerk, did you get the people? I don't have to pick. All right, then it's moved and seconded. Seeing no discussion or debate, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. That motion carries and the proclamation is approved. I'd like to invite Don to come up to the podium first, and then we'll invite the whole team up as well for the presentation of the proclamation and some special recognitions. So it is my pleasure on behalf of the whole council to present the proclamation, but maybe we could invite, before I read the proclamation to the record and make some of the presentations of our memento, if we could invite the members of the teams to come forward and stand behind you, Don, if you could, as they come forward, announce their names so everyone at home can hear. Then I'll do the proclamation, then I'll ask you to give a speech after that.
All right, I will blow it if I announce all the kids. But just to clarify, it was... all three of the Memorial Park teams won the District All-Stars, the 9, 10-year-old All-Stars, the 10, 11-year-old All-Stars, and the 11 and 12-year-old All-Stars. We also, and our 12-year-olds won the TOC Tournament of Champions. So my understanding, that was the first year it's happened, but they did great. Outstanding job. And also, I know there's some junior teams here. They didn't win the All-Star, but they played well. They always do. Once you leave Memorial Park, you head on over to the juniors, and they did well too. So again, I'm not going to announce all the kids because I would blow it, like I said. But if we'll start with the 9, 10-year-olds, if you guys want to come up. The 9, 10-year-old All-Star team.
All right, Don.
That's it. There he is, the one.
Yeah, Don might blow, but I'm going to ask you just come over and quickly say your name.
Cody Stevens.
Come on, guys. Come on. Is that it? It is still baseball season and football for a lot of these kids. So a lot of them. Yes, that's it. They're glued to the TV watching the debate. And so a lot of them are. They got not that they wouldn't want to be here. They just got baseball-related activities. So are you the only one?
I guess so.
That's the only one that matters. Good job. Then the 10-11, if you guys come up and line up, and then I'll send you up here and give us your name.
Blake Pedersen. Ryan Tolson. Graham Farrell. Tommy Williams.
Jared Madrigal.
Theo Dopkins. Clement Brown.
Andrew Gelly.
And the 11 and 12-year-olds, how many are here? Come on up.
Alex Silva.
Jacob Engstrom.
Xavier Gladu.
Jacob Rapp.
Nico Logsdon.
Matt Hansen.
Deepak Vandu.
All right, and like I said, there's a lot more. This is what we have here tonight. And the guys back there on the field, these are the ones that won the TOCs. You'll see them wearing their medals. So if you guys want to stand up, and we'll give you a round of applause. Come on, hey, you guys come on up here too. Come on. Come around and say your name.
Jacob Rapp. Alex Silva. Xavier Gladu.
Michael Emerald.
Christian Lucero. Chris Vargas.
TJ Darrington.
Just real quick, I don't have any speeches prepared. I'm not a speech person, but I would just like to thank you, Mr. Mayor, and the council for recognizing them for their hard work. I mean, they worked hard, and they really presented the city well, not only with their athleticism, but their on-the-field behavior as well, which is important. We're really proud of these kids, and I mean, from here, it's on to high school and even college. So this is where we kind of set the foundation for maybe the rest of their career. So we're really excited about them and doing as well as they did. And again, thank you guys for recognizing it and honoring them in this way. We appreciate it.
All right, so next I want to read the proclamation that the council just adopted into the record, because the whole community is extraordinarily proud of every one of these players, everyone in the leagues, and also the parents and the snack bar volunteers and everyone else that makes this happen. That creates these kind of opportunities for young people in our community to excel, to try, to learn, to be athletic, to get some exercise, to learn how to get up against all odds and to fight and win and to be good sportsmen even if you don't. Everything that we value in this community is represented in the Little League and in every one of these players. And so we're extraordinarily proud of the achievement, but also the ongoing every year work of making this Little League so successful. It's such an integral part of what we're about in West Sacramento. So this is a proclamation of the West Sacramento City Council recognizing the West Sacramento Little League for winning the 2012 District 6 championships. Whereas the West Sacramento Little League has been an active part of the community for more than 50 years. And whereas West Sac Little League has consistently offered a strong baseball program where the youth of West Sacramento can learn and grow. And whereas since its inception, more than 15,000 Little League players have participated in West Sacramento Little League programs. And whereas many of the players who grew up in the West Sacramento Little League go on to play successfully at the high school level, and whereas 100% of the baseball players at Delta High School played in the West Sac Little League, and whereas 80% of the 2012 River City High School varsity team played in the West Sacramento Little League, and whereas 25% of the 2012 Christian Brothers High School baseball program played in the West Sacramento Little League, and for 59 years, the West Sacramento Little League has been playing its home games in Memorial Park, and this season has been the most successful in their history. And whereas collectively the West Sacramento Little League won the District 6 championships for the 9-10 division, the 10-11 division, 11-12 division, and major division tournament of champions. And whereas a special commendation is due to the West Sacramento Little League for an exciting, hard-fought, extraordinarily successful season, now therefore be it proclaimed that the City Council of the City of West Sacramento does hereby recognize and offer its congratulations to the teams of the West Sacramento Little League for winning the 2012 District 6 championships. Congratulations.
And also, we're going to just give each of the council members and the mayor a pin. It's just our pin, Little League pin, established, like I said, 59 years ago, 1953. So they'll wear them proudly, I'm sure. So, again, thank you.
Thank you. So the Little League is a little over twice as old as the city. We're just 25 years old this year as well. But we also wanted to give every member of the teams up here today, and I know others as well in the league, a copy of a book, because while it's important to play baseball in our community, it's also important to read and read about baseball. This is a book called Gold on the Diamond. It's a book about Sacramento's great baseball players in our region, and they've been donated to us in order to promote reading in our community, and we couldn't think of anyone better to enjoy these books than the members of the West Sacramento Little League. And so our city clerk's got a copy for everyone here this evening, along with a commemorative sticker for this season's extraordinary accomplishment. So congratulations, and thank you for being great ambassadors, great representatives of our community to the West Sacramento Little League. Thank you.
All right, guys, come on, good job. What do I know?
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot we gave one additional gift, which is these little slips are redeemable for 2 vouchers to a River Cats baseball game in the 2013 home season.
I did. Let me go like this. Where's Alex?
Yeah, I'm short. Hi. Short. Hi. I'm a boss. What's up? Hi.
Andrew's gay.
Like that's
You're welcome. Okay. Thanks for coming out tonight. All right. Thank you. See ya. Thanks, Coach. Where's Alex?
Yeah.
See you guys.
All right. Returning to our regular order of business, this will be item 1A, which is presentations by the public on matters not on the agenda but within the jurisdiction of the City Council. This is an item, as a note on our agenda, that we can't take action or take up items that are brought up under item 1A, but it is an important opportunity for a public forum. We do ask that anyone wishing to address the council on this or any other item this evening to please fill out one of the yellow cards that's available at the front door and to turn it into the city clerk. And we accept those cards all the way up to the point of the conclusion of the staff presentation. Once the council discussion and the public comment and testimony have begun, we don't take any additional cards. And so if you have an interest in speaking on one of the items that's on the agenda tonight, turn it as soon as possible, but certainly by the conclusion of the staff report on that item. Also in front of the clerk is a flip chart that just indicates what item we're currently considering in order to follow along, because sometimes it can be a little obtuse. And then we also ask that for some folks, we know that for some folks speaking in public can create some anxiety, so although we just broke this rule, we do ask that there not be any demonstrations, either boos or applause, or catcalls or cheers, and that we try to maintain a civil discourse in the chambers. All right, so with that, we have a few requests to speak on item 1A tonight, and the first is by Angelica De La Gea.
Hi, good evening. And I wanted to thank the mayor and the city council and city council member Mark Johannesson. I'm here on behalf of the Latino Democratic Party. Is that the?
Oh, it's my fault. You marked item 3, and we are not
I
at
was
that
like,
item yet.
okay, are you
We'll
jumping?
bring it back up. We got a whole a proclamation and presentation to make as well. So, all right, we'll come back up. Next is Pat Flint.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Council members. I'd like to say congratulations to the West Sacramento Little League. I now have my fourth generation playing on the fields. My father was one of the founding fathers, so congratulations. I'm here to represent the students of the Washington Unified School District. I'm asking you, Mr. Mayor, to please withdraw your petitions for the special election. I know that you are actively seeking signatures for this. It is at too great of a cost to this district to have this election take place. I feel badly that it's come to this. I believe it should have gone to an election myself, although it did not, the circumstances with which it happened, it was after the cutoff date that they were notified that it could go to an election process. $100,000 is a lot to the students of this district. It's way too much to spend on a special election. Christopher, you have the power to stop this. Remember the West Beers situation on the city council? It could have gone to an election also, but this council, or part of this council, chose to appoint Mr. Beers in a city council position. So please, I'm asking on behalf of the students of this district, they've already quit busing students to this district. It's a tremendous safety hazard for a lot of these kids to walk to their schools. I'm asking you again, withdraw the petition. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Flint. Stacy Meyer.
My name is Stacy Meyer, and I was the senior crime analyst for the West Sac PD for 9 years, providing exemplary and award-winning service until I was inexplicably laid off in 2010. I'm here to place these statements on the record. After I learned of my fate, I petitioned the council for redress and was surprised that I received such little representation. After speaking at the council meeting on May 19, 2010, I was saved temporarily, but was ultimately fired after apparently being a topic of discussion during a closed session where I was not invited to attend nor allowed to advance my interests. Ultimately, not only were all of the POA members at risk saved, but some whose positions were eliminated were allowed to transfer to other positions which they had never held before. No such exception was made for me or any of my fellow non-POA union casualties, even though we had consistent track records of excellence and had worked for the city for years. So why the discrimination? The fact is, POA members received undue influence simply due to their union status. In a free market, society is run by merit, not political agendas. The citizens should know that merit played absolutely no role in the decision-making process as to who would be terminated at the PD. Instead, the city overpays for underperformance and in some cases, outright incompetence. Myself and others were nothing but political casualties, where the biggest losers were the citizens. Pure and simply, your decisions harm people. After the final decision, Chief Drummond admitted to me that he alone made the decision to lay me off, unlike the other positions that were decided by an executive committee. Clearly, there is no oversight to his decisions. I and many staff members at the PD will tell you the chief is a terrible decision maker. Mayor Cabaldon, in your State of the City address, you stated, Toby Ross is committed to making sure we are able to keep those highly talented, committed, inspired staff, and he's been a master at accomplishing that. Really? That is not what happened at the PD, where some of the most talented were instead shown the door. I continue to hear several of you state that it is not your job to micromanage staffing decisions at the PD. As a legislative body, one of your two primary duties is to investigate and inform. And when the executive branch is in a position to tell you what you can and cannot investigate, the system is on its head and accountability cannot exist. The worst part is that the city leadership, including the Director of Administrative Services, the previous city manager, and the council itself were complicit in these matters. You know what's been going on, and you have allowed it to continue at the expense of people like myself and your constituents. So I'm speaking and turning in a new petition to have you finally redress these issues properly. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael, I'm sorry, Warnigan. Okay, thank you.
About 6 months ago, I met Stacy and I kind of looked over the circumstance that she's basically brought forward to you. And I'm the president of an organization called Project Commonwealth, and I spend a lot of time basically looking at municipalities, governing branches, and we do have a large calamity. There's very little in the way of checks and balances in our system. Part of it comes down to elections at large. Part of it comes down to having a population of 45,000 people and having the minimal allowable size of representation, which is 5. It's come to the point where the executive branch basically can practically tell city government what they can and can't do. And in a system where we're supposed to, have taxation with representation, it's, these checks and balances have been defeated. One of my biggest criticisms in this world is these closed sessions. You're the only city that I've ever seen that actually starts out your meeting with a closed session. I've never seen that before. Usually you go into closed session when you have an item. When closed sessions originally started, it was 1776, and Congress held closed sessions because we were at war. I mean, there's supposed to be extraordinary exceptions. And, it's generally the presumption that bad things go on when you hold closed sessions. And yet now we have these systems where checks and balances are eliminated. It shouldn't just be up to the courts to redress grievances. I mean, it's your capacity to hire a lawyer to go in and fix a problem. And only when the courts step in. Well, the burden shouldn't all be on the judiciary. And, I'm kind of embarrassed that our system's degenerated as badly as it has. There's a certain way I feel like I'm embarrassed for coming up, but, in this day and age, you have to say, I'm sorry, you did somebody wrong. And you're practically singled out, and yet that's the truth. And yet that's the very thing that happened to Stacy. She got singled out, with all these commendations of doing an excellent job, and yet she gets fired. I'm embarrassed. And I shouldn't be. I mean, it's practically standard operating procedure from this city council to, things are rotten. I don't understand why our municipalities are now hurting people, yet it's standard operating procedures. I see it up and down the state. And I'm angry about it. I'm angry I can stand in front of here. You guys have 4-year terms, at-large elections. You're accountable to almost no one. And there's undue influence by, everybody in the executive branch. And the citizen no longer has a part in their own government. Fewer and fewer people bother voting because it doesn't make sense. There's almost an aspect of where this is, futile for me to even say it. I mean, thankfully I got 3 minutes to say it. That may be the only redress that most people can get, but we get it. Hopefully we can get a little bit more. That'll come with time. That's it.
Okay, thank you. But those are all the requests we have under item 1A. So we're going to proceed to item 1B, which is council communications. Are there reports or other communications this evening? Mr. Johannesson?
Yeah, just quickly, the housing, Yellow County Housing met on September 20, and really the only item of consequence was the adoption of a paperless process, so everybody's going to iPads and kind of in line with what we're doing here at City Council.
Mr. Ledesma?
Thank you. On this past Monday, myself and Mayor Pro Tem Villegas attended the City School 2x2 meeting to discuss the main topic of the meeting was update on the Bright Park project, which is a joint project we've been looking forward to and working with the school district on looking at Bright Park through some of the past work and our Bright Visioning project and the further work we've done in looking at the school property. So it was a very good discussion. I think they'll be coming back to us. They need to go actually meet with some of the school board district members who were not present, make sure they have opportunity to look at it. But I think that's on track, and so we should be seeing that at some point soon. Also, last Thursday, the 27th, was a meeting of the Oversight Committee, which I am the chair. We had just a few items on it, including looking at the due diligence around low and moderate income housing that is currently being looked at and reviewed for the Redevelopment Oversight Committee and dissolution of that. So we just had a brief presentation of that review that was done by an outside consultant. Lastly, I will say regarding the YOLO Natural Heritage Program JPA Board, I've reported to the council before that there's been some change in the management structure of the JPA. There's been a review of the governance. New interim director has been appointed. The county is looking through, along with the board members from the 5 jurisdictions that are on that JPA, to make sure that project's on track. Doing a financial review of it. We met this past this past Monday with the Department of Fish and Game to brief them, and this begins our process of starting to talk to our partners, continuing to make sure they're aware of our progress, they're aware of our updates, and they're aware of the actions we're taking. That's leading up to a meeting we'll have on October 15th, which will be a full review for the public. So. Again, just to keeping you updated on that item. That's all I have.
Pro Tem Villegas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple to report on. First, the Sacramento Regional County Sanitation District met last week, and the one item to note, bring up to the council is aware the South River Road pump station that part of our district, just outside the city limits. There is continuing conversations about how to protect that in case of a catastrophic flood, and so the conversations about creating a ring levee around that pump station to make sure that everything continues to move should there be a flooding has continued to take place. We approved the environmental documentation for the work that's necessary to continue on that project. There was actually quite a robust conversation, largely because the need to create that levee will create the need for about 500,000 cubic yards of soil to create the appropriate size and strength levee. And so that will require there to be a lot of soil used, and so our staff has been closely watching to make sure that the soil that's being used for the ring levee system doesn't compromise the integrity of the work that's happening around in the region. So that's the item that was most significant for us. And then earlier this evening, the Port Commission met, and the only item to note there too, actually, we adopted an amendment with a contract for consulting services for the channel deepening project in the amount of nearly $50,000, and then we received a brief update on the status of our port business plan that's going to move forward in the very near future, and that's it.
All right, a couple items to report on. 2 weeks ago, I traveled to Dallas for the Mayor's National Workforce Development Summit to lead the session on career academies and transitions for youth from high school programs into the workforce. As the council knows, I'm the lead on education for the U.S. Conference of Mayors. It's a good session around both some of the major school reform policies across the country and what is happening in some of the metropolitan areas, but also we had a lot of employer in participation in trying to move beyond the traditional Workforce Investment Board approach to really achieving much tighter integration with local schools. Not in the sort of have an internship or we'll donate a computer, but much deeper around how to actually integrate a lot of the career-oriented education in the same way that similar to what happens at River City High School, Project Lead the Way, and some of the biomedical academy programs that are there, but integrating the academic content and the career content together so that students in communities like ours are graduate ready for both college and career, both of them, not one or the other. You don't have to choose, you don't have to track students in the 8th grade, but that requires some really deep curriculum integration. So that was the focus of the session that I led at the summit. The board of directors of SACOG met here in West Sacramento for the first time in a long time. We had a brief board meeting, and then I think, as I previewed for the council before, we took the board over to Farm Fresh to You to tour their facility and get a sense of what's going on. Most members of the SACOG board have heard of community-supported agriculture and the boxes and all of that, but there were, other than those of us from YOLO, no one else really could appreciate the scale at which this is happening through Farm Fresh to You, and both here in Northern California now and in Southern California. And so the story of Cape Valley Farms emerging from what they continue to do in terms of actually producing high quality food produce at their farm here in the county, but really making that big transitional leap towards distributing affordable, healthy, local, fresh food to families, not as a social program, but as a business that's quite successful. Was a big eye opener. And then we took the board to the port as well to learn more about the central role that the port can play in the strengthening of our regional agricultural economy. So that was a big plus. And the board the mayors and supervisors, from council members from throughout the region, were very impressed with both facilities. And then on Friday, I will be in Washington, D.C. Doing a presentation with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to the Mayor's Water Council about this issue, a range of issues around flood protection and FEMA, land use mapping, and that sort of thing, but with a particular focus given Assistant Secretary Darcy's denial of our credit request around that topic, and rallying more of the mayors in the country to take an aggressive stance with the administration and with the Congress about getting that fixed. As the council knows, we've had a lot of progress with the others in this area, both within the Corps, within FEMA, within the Congress. The White House has been helpful, and I hope to be at the White House on Friday to press this case too. But it's really critical to the rapid completion of our flood protection projects, but also avoidance of the Natomas remapping challenge. So it's a big priority for us, and we've been able to get some other mayors across the country deeply engaged, but we want to get more of them knocking on the door of the White House and the Corps of Engineers and the Congress as well. So that's Friday. I'll report back on the results of that at our next meeting. Right, item 1C is appointments to boards and commissions. We're not going to make any of those. If anyone's caring about that, we're not going to make any appointments prior to the November election, since all of the appointments expire shortly thereafter anyway. That brings us to item 3, which is a presentation of a proclamation recognizing October 2012 as Latino Voter Registration Month. Is there a motion on this proclamation?
Second.
Been moved by Mayor Pro Tem Villegas and Councilmember Ledesma. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries unanimously, and there is a presentation of the proclamation. Yes, we've got, I know Angelica is here because we brought her up earlier. Carlos was supposed to be here too, but, all right, sorry, I didn't see you. Yes, please. And Mr. Johanneson's also been deeply involved in some of this work as well.
Hi, Oscar. He went to school with my wife's brother.
West gets smaller every night. So you want to step on this side so folks can. So, well, thank you very much, first of all, for coming. It takes a lot of work to continue to try and strive to get folks to register to vote. It takes a lot of work, and so we want to recognize some of the work that you've done, certainly with the Latino Voter Registration Month being the month of October. So I wanted to read part of the proclamation so that folks can hear a little bit about the information that follows the work. Whereas the continuity, strength, and legacy of any democratic society is dependent on the education, enlightenment, and the participation of its residents, which we heard a little bit earlier this evening. Whereas a significant portion of the electorate concentrated in low-income and minority communities remains disconnected from the electoral process. And whereas in 2010, the census for Latinos composed of 31% of the population here in West Sacramento. Whereas nationally, the number of Hispanics registered voters from 11.6 million in 2008, the presidential election year, to 10.9 million in 2010, when congressional races were on the ballot in many states. Whereas the empowerment of all qualified voters, including those with limited influence and wealth, can result in the election of leaders truly representative of their constituents. Whereas the City of West Sacramento's intensive voter registration efforts can substantially increase the number of qualified underrepresented residents who have the opportunity to select their elected representatives and decide the important initiatives forthcoming, now therefore be proclaimed, blah, blah, blah. The City of West Sacramento is very supportive of your work, and so thank you very much for coming this evening. And this is a difficult issue, so it does require someone to sort of stick to it and to continue to raise the profile of the work that's being done. So thank you very much for your work. All right, and you want to say a few words of that?
Sure. I was just going to say that currently there are in California 2 million eligible Latino voters who are not registered to vote. We know that for a democratic societies succeed by the participation of the citizenry. And I want to say that I'm very proud to live in a city which encourages registration, especially at a time when we are seeing in other states efforts to go back in time, to restrict the franchise, to keep people from voting. And I think that's the wrong direction for a democracy. So I want to applaud all of this city council, Mayor, Mr. Johansson, Mr. Christoph, saw you the other day. Mr. Ledesma, I haven't seen you since we were at the highway spitting up the fumes from cars with those signs we were holding up for people to vote. But I want to congratulate you all on taking the opportunity, taking advantage of issuing a proclamation to encourage people to vote when so many other states are going the wrong direction. Thank you.
Thank you. And Angelica, now this is your moment. Thanks. Sorry for the mistake earlier.
That's okay. Well, thank you, Mayor, and thank
You can go on the other. We only use
I
that.
feel kind of funny.
There was a time in an old city hall when we didn't have cameras, and the only way for the audience to see was if we stood on this side. There was a little X mark there, and so we do it just out of habit. But now there's cameras; people at home can see you better actually in that location. So welcome.
Thank you. Well, I just want to thank you on behalf of the Latino Democratic Party and the Chicano Latino Caucus for the California Democratic Party. Latinos have long felt disenfranchised from many communities, and West Sacramento has really strived and has really done a great job at not making us feel that way. We always feel acknowledged. We always feel welcomed. Having the event at Rayleigh Field that you spearheaded, City Council Member Mark Johannesson, bringing in all those groups and all the clubs that came out. We had almost 7,000 people, almost 1,400 registered to vote. That was huge. A huge Latino community and Russian community, Sikh community came out there. So thank you so much for this.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I mean, this takes citizen activism and a lot of hard work and time out in the sun, and a lot of people saying no, for a few people to say yes. But it does make a huge difference for all the reasons that have been said. It's one reason why voter participation in this city has kept up with. It's better than it was even before we started growing. And that's largely due to efforts of folks on the ground working hard. You know, with internet voter registration now possible, and you can register closer to the election. In fact, if you're not registered to vote yet, you still can for this election. You can do it online. You can do it the same way you always have. But we're always going to need people in the community to step up and remind others and give them the chance and give them the hope. Once they do it, people who are registered to vote, their kids register to vote, then their kids register to vote. It's just like going to college. It makes a huge difference permanently. And so thank you very much. I mean, our council is the most diverse city council in the region, in part because the citizens in this community demand that. And it's because everyone has a voice and everybody participated only because they're registered. So thank you for the leadership that you play. And thank you, Mr. Johansson. It was a really incredible event across the region that a lot of people put together, but Mr. Johansson was a critical, as you say, spearhead in making that a reality. All right, item 4 is a presentation of a proclamation indicating an interest in continued participation in the exploration of a community choice aggregation. This one's a little different, and so we're going to, I think first, Mr. Johansson wanted to invite John Mott-Smith to come forward and make a presentation on the status of this project. We've heard about this previously. Mr. Johansson is our designated representative as part of the work that's going on countywide. And Mr. Mott-Smith, who you've all seen before because we worked on many projects with him countywide, is here this evening to provide some additional review.
Well, let me just briefly give a brief report. We've the committee has met maybe 3 times or so, and during the course of those meetings, it became evident that we needed to reach out to the different cities in the county to have John come and explain really what this community choice aggregation is about. And we have a proclamation tonight. I could probably read it from the podium here, and then we'll come and give it to you. But essentially what this does is it's not binding to the city. It just shows an interest in the city to continue to investigate community choice aggregation, which is a way that the county or the entity that would be formed would provide additional types of power to residents of Yolo County. And for example, the Marin organization is now being replicated in San Francisco, and you can actually buy green power through this. So it actually is a utility, but it requires cooperation with the local utility because you need the transmission lines. So there is a state law that allows this to happen. PG&E is still going to be in the mix, and of course you're going to be competing with a utility like that. So I asked John if he would come and make to make a presentation today, and I can go ahead and present the proclamation and allow him to make the presentation.
Well, maybe he presents and then we can vote on it.
Okay.
Unless he says something that the council doesn't like.
My name is John.
Are you going to introduce Mr. Souza? Because if
in
not,
just 1 second.
Okay.
My name is John Mott Smith. I'm a staff to Yolo County in matters related to climate change. The county adopted a climate action plan which includes a investigation of community choice aggregation as a greenhouse gas reduction measure. Usually Supervisor Saylor, who is the chair of the committee, would be here to talk with you about this. He's not able to be here, but Stephen Souza is the vice chair of the exploratory committee, and he's going to give you the nuts and bolts of community choice aggregation.
Thank you, John. And first off, I think this is a great night for baseball. Your city, the parent organization of the River Cats, had a fantastic last 3 days and season for that matter, and let's hope it goes further. To the matter before you, your representative, Councilmember Johannesson, gave you some of the specifics of what we're after in continuing our actions to seek to become a community choice aggregation county. The county has a purpose of, in their climate action plan, they need to reduce greenhouse gases. In order to do so, one of the biggest reductions comes from energy demand. There aren't enough residents in the county in order to see an effective reduction in greenhouse gases. That's why it has to be a collaborative effort amongst all the cities if we're going to do something on a larger scale. Community choice aggregation came about in 1997 with the first legislation, AB 1980. Had a bunch of little problems, and then in 2002, AB 117 was written, which made it a little clearer as to the path in which cities or aggregated entities, county, cities, could go about purchasing their own electricity and selling to their customers using the transmission lines of the local provider of electricity and the administrative apparatus. So there is no divorce going on between PG&E. It just allows the cities within the county or a city or a county, like in the case of Marin, to go ahead and purchase their own electricity, seek the sources they purchase it from, seek the type of energy they purchase, and sell it in different layers. So you can have an all green, or you can have a 50% green electrical energy provided to your customers. We are, since the beginning of the year, going about trying to figure out, can it be done? Can it be done economically? Is it feasible? Will it provide us a future that allows us control of our electrical energy? Could we potentially produce our own electrical energy within our county? In particular, each and every one of our cities has a capability. You have water. You have the potential of providing electricity through water. Davis doesn't. Woodland doesn't. Woodland has access, but not as close as you do. Woodland has biomass. Davis has photovoltaics. We all have some potential that we could bring to the table. There's also biomass capability up in the whole Capay Valley. We have to do something with all of that green waste rather than just burn it. It would be nice to utilize it in another form. So we're looking at, is it feasible? Can it be done? And we would love to have all of the cities in the county continue in this quest. And that's why this proclamation is before you. It's to take it from the step of, well, we've gathered together, we've discussed, you have a representative. are we all on board on this? Do we all want to continue in this effort? And in order for it to really happen, it has to be, as has been shown by not only Marin, but other entities like San Francisco, Beverly Hills, Chula Vista, Oakland, Pleasanton, and there's a whole list of cities now lining up to go this route. They all have to have public support. It's vital in order for it to happen. And you are the representatives of the public of the city of West Sacramento, and that's why this is before you today.
Well, we've talked about the concept before when we appointed Mr. Johannesson. I think there's broad interest in moving forward. My experience on both habitat conservation now and animal control just raises one flag that we just need to pay attention to as we proceed, which is that we have different value ratios between where energy comes from and how much we're willing to pay for it, and so within the county, right? They're just just to put it in the most crass caricature possible. I suspect many Davis voters would be willing to pay much more for the greenest source of energy than many of our citizens would. Our citizens also value environmental sustainability and green energy, but maybe not. Maybe if the call is we lose this company or that company, then it's not worth it. And we're competing with the city of Sacramento on a lot of projects, and so we have to be very attentive to our electric grid. So those sorts of things need to be designed into the designed into the solution. I know that's not unknown to you, but it's heavy on at least on my mind, because of these other JPAs, which were developed for largely the same kind of economies of scale, but we do sometimes run into these issues. That's natural. That's good. We run into them within the city too, but we need to. It's not all hugging all the time, and so we need to, as we put these together, have to design the mechanisms to resolve those in ways that allow us to achieve all of our objectives. So, and for us, competitiveness is a key factor given our location. So,
if I could say something. That's what you articulated is very much the concern of the exploratory committee, and the appointments that have been made by Councilman Johannesson and others, Dan Ramos, and NorCal Beverage. Winters has two very large electrical users. Woodland is looking at the hospital and PCP. There's community advocates who are there. There's large industrial users, and it won't happen unless not just the people themselves generally, but the large users actually opt into this program, because that would be the weak spot. It would be the potential for failure if they did not.
Okay. Any other questions or discussion? Is there a motion on the proclamation? Mr. Johansson moved it. Did you say something? You seconded it, right?
I read some of the articles that have been written, but you've been written, and it's good to put a face with the name.
All right, so Mr. Johansson moved and Mayor Pro Tem Villegas seconded the proclamation. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. That carries.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Good to see you, Steve. It's interesting being on this side.
Good to see you, Steve.
All right, that brings us to the consent agenda, which is items 5 through 10, with the minus item 8, which, as we announced earlier, has been continued to a future meeting. So are there any questions or comments or any items to remove on consent? All right, seeing none. Is there a motion on the consent agenda? Mr. Johannesson moves and Mayor Pro Tem Villegas seconds. Seeing no discussion or question, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. That motion carries. The consent agenda is adopted. That brings us to item 11, which I don't have. Oh, there it is. In the wrong tab. Gotcha. Which is continuation of a CDBG public hearing for consideration of the 2011-12 grantee performance report. The city manager is requesting that we continue the public hearing. Is there any objection? Seeing none, that'll be the order. Item 11 is a presentation of a budget workshop. Mr. Sharma is leaving. Mr. Yeah. Yeah, we continued item 11.
I think it's number 11.
I did, but then we read it, continued it.
Oh, you're too fast for this.
Yeah, that's what happened.
Obviously. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Excuse me. It's nice to be back. I was here a couple weeks ago, and we did a real short sort of overview of the budget. We wanted to come back and do a little bit more detail, so you should be having a PowerPoint come up in a second when Rankin gets that up. So I'd like to start out just by thanking both the finance and the HR staff managers. I may be up here speaking, but they did a huge amount of work, and the amount of work they did won't even be reflected in what you see tonight, because we decided really just to gather all of the information we possibly could relating to the financial state of the city in depth that we would be able to use more long term, and then condense it down to sort of the salient points tonight. I'm not speaking on behalf of Sanya. They're my representative. Oh, they can see the PowerPoint, but they can't? Okay. So, no, I have my copy here. Thank you. So one of the reasons I'm here is, as you know, 3 cities have declared bankruptcy, and now there are 9 that have declared fiscal emergencies, which is what the step prior to bankruptcy. Excuse me. That obviously causes concern with our staff, with the council, with the citizens, the businesses, and we wanted to take this opportunity to communicate to the council and to our constituents what we have done to try to avoid those type of problems here in West Sacramento. And the first thing we wanted to do was let's look at how other cities have got themselves into trouble, because it's a roadmap that we don't want to follow. And I think the first thing that happened is there were many cities that had overly favorable forecasts, models of the future. They saw the economy going down in 2008, but they thought it was going to be a 2-year blip, and it wasn't going to be that bad. One of the differences that we had is our council saw the problem very early, saw that it was probably a real change, and gave direction to staff to start dealing with it. That was sort of the main cause. But then you had the failure because of the short-term view of the problem. They didn't seek employee concessions. They used carryover money or one-time money. They didn't make any adjustments to the employee benefits, the pensions, the health care, the retiree health. They over-leveraged their debt. They started using reserves, thinking things will turn around. And then finally, they had a lack of accounting controls. So this is a study of all those 12 cities by my staff, reading staff reports, figuring out what happened in these places. And we're not going to identify the cities and call them out, but this is a sort of a history of how cities got themselves into trouble. So what did we do that was different? Well, as I said just a second ago, the staff and council identified the problem early, and there's a phrase now that everybody's very familiar with, which is the new normal. We didn't invent it, when we probably didn't even know it, but I think this council sensed the new normal before most people. They were communicating to us, there's a change, staff, and you need to get on top of this. And so the direction was, let's take action, let's make cuts, let's keep our eye on the ball, and you as a council gave us guidelines that we have used for the last 4 years, budget guidelines that have been our sort of roadmap of how to deal with this. You've encouraged us to have it be a balanced approach, make sure we continue to take care of the community, that we care for our employees in the process of doing it, and that we look for long-term solutions. As I indicated, you saw that this was not a short-term problem. So we had those policies, and we used a balanced approach. So what did we do? Well, even before the slide you have here, which was for the first 2-year budget after the economy went south, the 9, 10, 10, 11 budget, the first thing that happened is staff went to all of the employees and said, we see this coming. If you want to voluntarily take time off, if you want to reduce your schedule slightly, we're looking for reductions. And our city manager at the time directed all department heads, no expenditures without really thinking long and hard about whether you have to do it. And the question he always asked us was, what are you going to do if you don't spend that money? And what's the impact? And if it's not a significant impact, don't spend it. So we kept control right away. And then we in finance like to use this three-legged stool. That's sort of our analogy because, you know, three-legged stools are solid. They stay up. Two-legged stools fall over. So we look for a three-legged stool. And the first thing we did is we cut expenditures. We started looking to cut expenditures everywhere we could. Part of how we did that is we eliminated vacant positions, and we started negotiating early retirements. And the council gave direction on how to do that. And that was very painful because many of those early retirements were people who didn't want to leave, who were long-term employees of the city, loyal, dedicated, excellent employees. And they left because they said, the people we've hired who have kids, we're going to have to lay them off when we've been here 25 years and we're able to retire. They did it for the city, and they need to be complimented. But that was your direction and wonderful employees that stepped up. And so we reduced our staff significantly. Then we went to our employees. We shared the information. We shared all the information with them of what our budget was, what the problems were, and how much money we needed to save. We told them we were using a balanced approach, not all on their backs. We were doing the expenditure cuts first, but that we needed the employees to share, and our employees all stepped up and all accepted reductions in their total compensation. Excuse me. We then looked at our carryover money, and I'm going to show you some slides here in a second to help visualize this. We looked at the carryover money, and where a lot of cities just use that, thinking that'll get us through the day, we used some of it, but not all of it, which was good because we needed to use more of it the next year. And then we did things to stop any future bleeding. No general increases. No staff position has received an increase for the last 4 years. People may have had step increases, but there's been no wage increases. We eliminated things like budget carryover, where money would flow from one year to the next and just sort of not pay attention, and all of a sudden you're spending money because you think you have it. We eliminated that. The money went away. And remember I said earlier, you couldn't spend it without getting through both me as the Director of Administrative Services and our city manager at the time. There was procedures we put in place to make sure we weren't spending money. And then finally, we started monitoring our budget more carefully at the direction of this council. The direction was keep an eye on this. You know, don't let this thing get sideways. So we did that. And we got through two-year budget in 9, 10, 10, 11, hoping things were going to turn. So unfortunately, it wasn't enough. The recession was deeper than we thought. It continued. Our property values and sales tax hits were more severe than we thought. So what did we do next? Well, again, we used the council's guidelines, which have been so helpful, to say, okay, a balanced approach across the board, even to all of our employees, fair to our employees, make sure we take care of the citizens with our services. Because through this whole first section, no service reductions, no changes in what we're providing. So we relentlessly looked for ways of being more efficient. Because we have some great finance and HR staff, we were able to have one director for 2 former departments, so we eliminated some management. We went to our employees and we said, we don't want to do this, but you're going to have to step up and give us a little bit more money to help balance the budget. But again, not all on their backs, because we also had some one-time money that we had brought in from various things. You settle a lawsuit, you put some money in, one-time money, not your general reserves, money that's just come in that's not normal, and you put it in a safe place to see in case you need it. So we had some of that money we hadn't spent. Did we use it all? No, we used some of it. Very, again, balanced approach. Use some of that money because you don't know how long the recession is going to go on. And then we were fortunate we had some new revenue, not a lot, but a little bit of parking revenue. We were able to discover that in our PERS health care, there was some return that we could get from that because of the payment for the balance of retiree health and normal health, so we were getting some money back. So that was going to go, and so we balanced the budget that way. And then we also, again, at the council's direction, we looked at the long-term issues, not just looking at the 2-year windows. We looked at the long-term issues. And the long-term issues were things like, let's look at all the debt, and let's see if we can reduce what that debt is costing the city. And at the council's very clear direction, no kicking the can down the road, no increasing the debt, just can we get a better rate and save some money. So we did that. We'll show you some slides with numbers and more details. We implemented a 2-tier retirement for almost all groups. We're still negotiating with fire, but police and all our miscellaneous employees, new employees are on a 2nd tier. Not going to save much money in the next year or two, but in 30 years, it'll make a huge difference. We'd have to wait 30 years, but over the course of the next 30 years. And then we had retiree health, which is very valuable and important to our retirees, which we wanted to maintain, but we had percentages, and as healthcare continues to go up, if you have percentages, then the percentage of a high number becomes a high number. And so we put dollar caps so that we had a more set amount that we knew we had to fund. And by the way, on retiree health, we've also been funding the unfunded liability at about $2 million a year ever since GASB 45. And so, we've been in the process of catching up with that obligation ahead of most cities, but still not where we need to be. So we still have a liability. All right, so let's show you some graphs. Graphs are always good when you do number stuff. So what you notice in this graph, if you look at fiscal year ending 2008 and 2009, you see we had really good years, and we had a lot more revenue coming in than expenditures. And the thing that is important to remember there is we were disciplined about that. We didn't just go out and spend that money, because remember what I said is in 2008, the council identified that we had this future problem and directed staff to start making a change. Well, changes take a little bit of time. And so you'll see the expenditures still actually went up a little bit in 9, but then you see them coming down in 10 and then way down in 11. But obviously what you see is a gap there, right? So how do we fill that gap? Well, look at the numbers above 08 and 09, and that's one of the ways we use those monies to help us in 10 and 11. When you look at 12 and 13, you're probably saying to yourself, and if you're out there watching on TV, you'll say, well, look, the city's great, right? We've got a balanced budget in 12 and 13. But remember, as I said just earlier, we use one-time money, we use employee concessions. So it's balanced, which is our obligation, but it's not balanced because our revenues and our expenditures are even. We were smart in the way we handled our budgeting, so we have the money. So let's look at this a different way, show you how we filled those gaps. This is a real good visual picture of what I've been talking about. If you look at 10 and 11, you look at the big blue sections, okay? Those are the carryover. So we had carryover, we used a lot of carryover and a little bit of employee concessions. That wasn't enough, so we used the rest of the carryover and the employee concessions, and then we got a big green. Look at how big that is. That's the work staff did to reduce staff and reorganize. Okay, that's a huge amount of savings, $1.169 million. Some of that occurred in 10, but we didn't get the impact until 11 because when we did the reductions and we negotiated, you didn't get the savings necessarily the first year, you got it in the second year, and then on forward. So that was the first 2 years. Now you look at the next 2 years, you notice the blue's gone. So what did these other cities do? They put everything in the blue right at the beginning, and they didn't have anything left. So the way we did the last 2 years, look at what's big. It's the purple. That's the one-time money. I think it's purple. That's the one-time money that we had saved, that we weren't intending to spend, but now we looked and said, well, we got a 2-year problem we need to deal with. You'll see in 13 we doubled the employee concessions, probably even a little bit more, so we asked more of our employees. We found some revenue, but we still had to use that one-time money. Now, fortunately, as I indicated, we used it, but we didn't use all of it. We still have some. We've been very judicious following the principles. All right, the next slide just gives you a little idea of the FTEs. So you can see we went from 422 to 389 to 341. That's one of the huge differences between us and a lot of other places. We did a quick get down, get the staffing levels where we can support it rather than slowly trickling down. And it was painful for all of us to have to do, obviously the council as our leaders, but we cut quickly, and our goal was that we were going to get it to a number that would be sustainable as quick as we could. That was what we wanted to do. We've had a little bit of trickle down, but it hasn't gone very far. Okay, so long-term issues that we need to be concerned about. So this is one of them. This is a graph that shows you what's happening with our PERS rates if we didn't do that two-tier system. What's important to look at is just the upward trend. If we didn't do anything, we would have fire at 41 going to 48 in the next 5 years. We'd have police at 36 going to 42 or 3, and we'd have miscellaneous at 14 going to 18. Simply not sustainable. And that's why we had to go for the two-tier. And just to show you, with the next slide will show you sort of what a two-tier does. So it doesn't solve the problem, right? You see the lines going up, and then the line under them shows you what the two-tier does. The important thing to remember from that picture is if you take the top grid, top line, that top line is going to continue to go up over the next 20 years. The bottom line is going to continue to go down, and so the gap between them will get bigger and bigger, and the savings will be more valuable for us, 10, 15, 20 years. By the way, on those, you'll notice that this was from our actuary. We actually implemented 3 at 55 for the police as part of our agreement, so we get a little bit less savings in this graph. We did implement the 2 at 60 for the miscellaneous, and as I indicated, we're in negotiations with fire right now. So that's how we dealt with the pension issue. We obviously now have a new law that has changed the rules starting January 1 that will be very helpful to the city, and I believe the city endorsed the policy for the reasons of long-term sustainability. We now have 2% at 62 as the new tier for new members, in other words, people who've never been in PERS starting January 1 in our miscellaneous groups, and we will have new either 2, 2.5, or 2.7 at 57 for our new police and new fire people effective January 1. That's going to help the city in the long run. So next thing we did to deal with long-term issues was we looked at our debt. And I really wanted, particularly for Councilman Ledesma, to be able to quote you some rule on exactly how much debt you should have that would be the good number for under finance rules. But my finance staff told me it actually doesn't exist. But I think they helped me understand it. What really is the case is if the bond rating agencies will not lower your bond, and if investors will invest, then they're looking at those numbers and they're obviously feeling like the numbers are pretty safe. And the fact that we were able to refinance all of these this year and save, as you can see, $5 million sort of long-term for the city, and the fact that the 2 top ones were private placements, meaning banks took that money and said, we like this investment, says that they like our balance of 12%. None of these are general obligation bonds, but they're bonds that do put some pressure and require some backing from the general fund. The stadium, it's a very second or even tertiary sort of backing, but we are at risk legally. So we did that. We did all the refunding, and the next slide shows you what that means, and it shows how we saved the $5.118 million. Now, some of that savings is going to help us in the short run. A lot of it helps us more in the long run. Again, not kicking the can down the road, no extension of time, no additional debt, no variable rates, none of those problems. We don't do that here. You wouldn't let us, we wouldn't do it. Some of it has a long-term, and some of it gets us some money to be able to do some things. And for example, the water revenue bonds will allow some work in our water system, which is a positive thing. So that was a long-term commitment that we made to the city to try to keep the budget balanced. Okay, as I indicated about the second or third slide, Council had, I think, tremendous foresight and saw that this was a long-term new normal and that we really needed to make sure our reserves were at an adequate level. The decision was made 15% of reserves was pretty low. I think part of it was some cities were crazy. They had 100% reserves. But we recognized that we needed to get to 20%. Council recognized that, gave staff direction. So that was in '08. So we quickly, between '08 and '10, got to 17%. And then again, I think, again, from the leadership of council and our staff, when we got to 17 and we were going to our employees and asking for more concessions, there was a general sense, let's not increase our reserves right now. We're asking more out of our employees again for another 2 years. We've got it up. Let's hold off for a little bit. And I think that's part of that whole balanced approach of fiscal responsibility, sensitivity, trying to use different ways to make sure that we're in good shape. But we do have good reserves. We haven't touched them. They're there for, the true emergencies the reserves are there for. A lot of people had accounting problems, so I got to kudo my staff a little bit. When they get, I take no credit for this. I'm really scared that I'm going to become the director and it'll be the first year we don't get the award. So I've told my staff that I hope that didn't happen. But 17 years in a row getting recognized as doing excellence in financial reporting. When there was a city somewhat close to us that went bankrupt, I got the staff report. It was about 80 pages, and I took all of the finance staff in a conference room after they all read it, and we went through everything that city did wrong from an accounting standpoint, and I said, we're not doing that, right? Don't do it. We're not doing that, right? Don't do it. We weren't doing any of it. In fact, we're doing things the way it should be done, and we're getting recognized. So, again, I think you should be comfortable that your staff takes their job very seriously. Here's one of the things I told Councilman Ledesma I wanted to do is show you a few different charts of ways to look at this so that I could come back quarterly and you'll see something that's similar and decide, hey, I like this chart, it works, so I'm going to give you a couple of different options here. We have 4 basic types of funds. We have 200 funds in the city, so over 200 funds. And Tish probably knows the exact number, but I don't. And we have 4 types. We have the general fund, we have special revenue funds, we have enterprise funds, and we have capital. We're not, capital comes to the council separately. There's a whole, as the mayor was talking about earlier, maybe that was in the board meeting, I don't remember, but the capital is looked at separately by the council as a whole to decide how they're going to prioritize capital. So what this does is it takes the enterprise, the special revenue, and the general fund, sort of our operating funds, and says, how are we doing? Obviously, the first thing I'm sure you're looking at is, 08 doesn't look really good, 94 million, and we only brought in 86. Well, Councilman Villegas, this is SAC Regional. No, it's SAC Regional and it's developer reimbursements. We had a lot of development in the early 80s, and at some point you got to reimburse developers under your agreements, and Lee was leaving and he wrote a lot of checks. They were overdue, so he held them as long as he could, but on the way out we had some developer reimbursements, and we had the SAC Regional. So that was that blip. From 09, 10, 11, 12, again, I've already explained what we did to fill that. That was the employee concessions, that was the expenditure reductions, that was the one-time money. And so you can see by 12, we're right now in pretty good shape. Again, giving kudos to the council, part of this is making adjustments to the water rates and those those enterprise funds that weren't holding their own that were part of the reason we were in trouble earlier, and now we're seeing that we're back balanced. Okay? I know my staff's going to. So here's another way of looking at it, a non-chart way of looking at the exact same thing. So this is the data behind the chart. So it shows you the general fund, what the budget was, the actual, and what the variance is. And I think what this tells you, I don't know about, it tells me that my staff is unbelievable. Because how we get a $40 million budget and we're off by 0.12% on expenditures and 0.5%, we're not even 0.5% off. I mean, it's very, very good accounting. Now, Tish will tell me that we tweak it, when we find things that need to be tweaked, and that's right, because that's what we should do. Keep looking at it and make adjustments. But we balance very close. Special revenue funds, again, very close. The thing that we're off on is expenditures, but we're off the right way. We're off by 7%. We're low by 7%. Notice, low on general fund expenditures to budget, low on special revenue fund to budget, low on enterprise to budget. And just a reminder, that's a budget that had already been reduced. Okay, we reduced the budget and we came in under budget. And that's all of our employees, all of our managers, our city manager, our leadership, and your direction. So we've been very frugal in keeping our expenditures under control. And we've been fortunate our revenues have been fine. So you can see that all in all, we're in pretty good shape for these funds. Next picture, just again, if you can even tell the difference between these are budget to actual, and you can see how close we've been in our budget to actual, just, almost identical. So it doesn't mean we can rest on our laurels. We have to continue watching this all the time, but we tried. We don't budget wrong. I'll give you an example. When we got into this problem in 2008, we were told your property value is going to go from a 10% increase to a 2% increase. And we all looked at each other and went, are they kidding? Who are you? No way. We budgeted a -2. It was -4. Thank goodness we budgeted a -2, because if we had budgeted 2 and got -4, we would have had a problem. Okay, so we're very careful. We look. We try not to be over optimistic. We try not to take the world. The world's going to crash and we're all going to run out of every money. We try to really actually evaluate what we think's going to happen. And this slide says that we've been pretty close. All right, so going to the general fund, which we've always used as sort of our barometer, because the special funds and the enterprise funds, we will come to you if those things get out of whack. Right? We watch those, and if they're out of whack, we come to you like we did in the water and say, hey, we got to make a change here because we're not balanced. But the general fund's our barometer. This is what we keep in touch with. So what's important here is if you look at the total expense and the operating surplus, it's important to recognize that with all the wonderful things I have said tonight about staff and council and our employees and the way we've managed it, we have an operating deficit. We have, actual 1.9 in 10-11. We have actual almost $1 million in 11-12. We got over $1 million in our current budget. Now, that doesn't mean we're operating in the red, because if you look below the red, that's how we've adjusted it. So you see, in 10-11, we use the adjustments. That's the reorganizations, right? 1.169 of reorganizations. And we use some carryover. So flashing forward to 12-13, where we're in now, it's very important to recognize that in 11-12 and 12-13, we've balanced the budget with $700,000 in one-time revenues in 11-12 and 1.4 in 12-13. And as I said, we still have a little less than $2 million in one-time money, but that's one-time money. When it's gone, it's gone. So that's why we've been very judicious in not using it as the sole way of balancing the budget like some cities did. But those are issues that we're going to have to deal with. They're operational issues, and as property taxes are sneaking up a little, that will help us. When the appeals slow down, that will help us. We had a good year in sales tax. So sales tax, and it always takes a little while for us to get the rebound effect. All right, so what's next? What are we going to do next is we're going to continue to look to council to give us direction and guidance and policy as to on how to go forward. Looking at the strategic plan that the council leads us in and how to implement it. We're going to continue to look for efficiencies. Councilman Johannesson always will make sure that he keeps that at the forefront of us, and that's great, as the rest of you. We will continue to look for those. We'll monitor the budget. I meet with my budget manager every week. He meets with every department budget person every month, so we're upping the intensity of monitoring to make sure that we know what we're doing. And we will be transparent and communicate to the council and the citizens as to what's going on, and our employees, obviously. We've got a lot of threats we have to keep our eyes on. The PERS rates, healthcare costs for employees and retirees. Redevelopment, as you're very well aware, is a huge problem. We've lost $24 million, and we may have 2.5 coming back, and we're still figuring out the impact of that. Looking at other actions of the state, and then the state budget. And then last slide is we're going to look for every opportunity, to continue to do what we've done for 25 years. Starting with the mayor's committee led by Councilman Ledesma, that we've now got this community investment action plan, and we're pushing it forward and figuring out what we can do. Public-private partnerships everywhere we can, talking to our private partners. Economic development hubs, the food hub example, the Mayor Bloomberg challenge, and looking for every opportunity to find other sources of money. The port business plan that talked about that Aaron Laurel from my department and Rick Toft are working on right now, 24/7. Well, not really 24/7, but pretty seriously to get there, because the project keeps getting more complicated because it's a very important project. And I had IFD second, but it went to the bottom, and it now says next year, ? So, but we're going to keep looking for those type of opportunities. So I hope that was helpful, and I'll answer any questions. I have staff here to also for if you want to drill down.
Johannesson?
Yeah, thanks, Phil. Good presentation. I think it was well put together. I don't know if there's a way to make this accessible to the public. I'm not sure if you want to do the whole PowerPoint, but certainly some of these main graphics, historical graphics, I think, would be beneficial for everybody to see. But I wanted to kind of just go back a little bit. We've made decisions up here on how we felt, we should be in terms of being conservative with our money, making sure we don't overestimate. But really, I'd like to commend the staff in implementing that. It's been tough. We've gone through probably going on to 4 years now of this. And early on, there was basically an agreement that everybody would take the hit early on, all the way from the city manager, all the way through all parts of the organization, whether they're represented or not. And I think that really distinguished us from the region. You may have seen in the region when, Sacramento County is a good example, that it became more of a fiefdom, and I'm going to protect mine, and we're going to fight to protect. And there was really a sense of shared sacrifice here. And I know we couldn't have done it without that. It's been painful, and we've heard stories of people that were let go, and we tried not to do that. Hopefully it wasn't, we didn't make wholesale layoffs, but that was only because we had massive cooperation throughout the entire organization. So I really want to commend you and the staff, city manager, former city manager, in the work that's been done to date to do this. And just the other point is, even though it looks like we're getting close to breaking even, we do have the one-time revenues that kind of get us there right now. But we're not out of the woods yet. I don't think anybody on this council thinks that, we may see light at the end of the tunnel, but we don't know what the state's going to do. We're losing massive amounts that used to be allocated for redevelopment that we're not going to have. There's not an appetite to raise taxes. So we're really still managing finances very, very tightly, and from what I can see, still in the foreseeable future. Unless there's a clear blip that we're doing better. But even then, I think there's going to be a resistance to let's spend it. It's going to be let's be very conservative, and we've got the organization the right size now, more or less. I think we still have some adjustments to make, but I think we talked about being in this for the long haul, 10, 15 years. And so I think we're pretty well set up for that, but really I think staff needs to be commended for not balking at policy that we may have made, which can be an issue, but it hasn't been an issue in West Sacramento.
Thank you. Thanks, Phil, and thanks to the rest of your staff for the presentation. I know I've sort of been the one bugging you about this for the last couple of months, but on a couple of levels, I'll address first the process and what you've done, which is as important as recognizing the situation we were in 4 or 5 years ago, making the adjustments, and then managing to them. The fact that you put this together in a way that I hope constituents and others in the community can understand the change that has occurred. I think that's an equally important step that the community has to feel confidence. I know and I've joined the council just under 2 years ago. I knew we were in the midst of these changes. We were still making changes, but it was hard to communicate that to folks because you are reading the headlines, you are reading what else is happening, and it creates a noise. And what we need to communicate is that we're watching the ball and we're continuing to watch it. And I think this is a good first step to how not only we have to be disciplined with the dollars, but we also have to be disciplined in how we monitor it and look at it. And so our constituents know we're transparent. We are, from a financial viewpoint, people get where we are, and they understand the changes they're feeling every day, because there is a change. And I was looking for the number, I didn't get to it in time. The change percentage-wise in staff from 442, I think it is, to 321. The 21% difference. I think I was just I'm following through the slides. A 21% change, and people feel that it's you know, and I think what I think what I'm walking away with this is a general sense that okay, there was a purpose to this, and you see the change in the revenue from, I'm looking at it here today, is from $43 million in the general, or just in what's in the general fund, is a $43 million general fund to a low of just over 37 million. It's a big hit. And then the revenue changes, which again I couldn't get to, and I would like I took your copy, sorry, but I would like a copy so you can and I think on a going forward basis, this is exactly the sort of exercise that I think the community expects of its municipalities now, is to know that not only are we looking after it, and we don't just get a big three-ring binder full of spreadsheets, which I would be okay with, but it has to be, we have to be able to go out and communicate it. They have to be able to read it, understand it. I did have, you asked for specific feedback, and I did like the operating funds, the revenue and expenditures slide, and you don't have it numbered, so this slide here.
Yeah, I know.
Which is a great indicator of sort of you know, obviously revenues always proceed in this environment. We saw a precipitous drop in revenues, and it just shows that we adjusted the operating budget accordingly. And I think monitoring this, however we monitor it going forward, is just a good barometer to kind of understanding, are we living within our means. And I think Mr. Johannesson had it exactly right, is that the going forward model for us is how do we manage within that, and how do we stay disciplined, because obviously if the revenues start going up, the immediate inclination of everybody, including could be myself, would be, okay, now we have it, we should spend it. When in the case, you know, things can change rapidly, things can occur, and I think that's what the discipline that we have to carry forward. This type of reporting helps. And lastly, I just want to point to, because I'm not sure, you know, how do you control? We've done a great job controlling the expenditure line, but your last slide on what's next and looking for other opportunities is really one I appreciated, because that's obviously what we're trying to get to, is how do you create more revenue as a government entity? How do you facilitate that? How do we go out and make that happen? And you know, I'm proud of where we are as a city. We're still living within our means. We have work to do. We're not done, and we're not going to shy away from that. But we have to keep our eye on the ball, and we have to keep finding ways to grow that. I know that everyone in this council has taken a stab or is continuing to push for how do we do this, and that's the thing I like about our council, either through the port or through economic development or through the food hubs, whatever. Those are all strategies to gain us more revenue, and I think that's what our community needs to know. That's why we're doing it, because we want to grow that revenue line so we can maybe get some services back. But again, we're probably looking more for stability. So I just applaud the effort. I look forward to the follow-ups in months and years to come. Thank you.
Christoph.
Yeah, just very briefly, I'd like to chime in on what my fellow council members have said. Phil, you put together a very good document. At least it shows from a chronological perspective, the different issues that the council over the past few years has really had to deal with. And, you know, some of them are employees, and some of them are salaries, and some of them are benefits, and you know, those are very difficult decisions for a council. Those are the tough ones. But, the council has made some very difficult decisions, and, we're trying to make sure that we don't become the next Stockton or San Bernardino or one of those other 9 places that are out there. And so I think that what you have done is at least given us an opportunity to take the document that you have, and we can show it to people and try to explain it as they ask questions about it. And so, I appreciate all the work you and all of your staff has done. So, thank you.
And just one quick comment. I believe we are going to try to put this on our website as a link. We've already discussed it. So we do want this to be out there for the community to be able to look at.
Mayor Pro Tem Villegas?
Yep, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just real quickly, I would echo what's already been said, so I'm not going to repeat it, but I do want to thank you, Phil. It does take a tremendous amount of work, and there's so much writing on this. I think the approach that we have taken really is there's no individual, there's no organizations, or there's no group of people who are to blame for the fiscal ills that we are all experiencing. So consequently, I think everybody generally has stepped up and said, we didn't cause this, but we do recognize we're in it, and we have to be a part of the solution. Otherwise, we continue to be a part of the problem. And I think our approach collectively has been just that. That's been our request of everybody to say, how do we become part of the solution of a problem that, maybe we didn't create, and we didn't, we don't have to take responsibility directly for it, but we do have to contribute to the solutions. And I think that sort of philosophical approach has been extremely helpful. I do need to I want to recognize one of the things, and I think your charts illustrate it pretty well, and that is the sort of the perpetual organizational changes that we've endured is extremely difficult for everybody. I mean, as a council, we had to make the tough decisions to vacate or to eliminate positions from folks who we would love to keep around. I mean, in a perfect world, we would love to be able to just say, everybody gets to keep their job and their salaries and continue on our merry way. We've had to make some extremely difficult decisions. And we've lost a lot of very good people, and we've continued to sort of reorganize our city's operations. But at the end of the day, we have to be able to balance our budget, and that's been extremely difficult. But I know we've talked about this before, but I want to recognize that. And then my final point is, although there is a sort of a small bump in revenues, if there's any lesson to be learned from all of this, and that is that little bump can lead to a host of problems if we aren't disciplined in how we spend them, or what our approach is to how we use those funds. And the notion that 1 year or even 2 years there's a slight bump in revenues is by no means indication that we can begin to spend those monies. I mean, that is the lesson that has to be learned in all of this. So we need to, and you've talked about this, the sort of the approach, the guidance, the framework that this council has created must continue to remain disciplined in that respect, despite all of the competing pressures to use those funds right away, because we've been suffering, we've been hemorrhaging for quite some time. So there's this impending pressure to use those funds, but we cannot cave into that. That is the lesson that has to come out of this. So, but I think you guys have done a good job of managing the system that we're so dependent on. So thanks for the presentation.
Yeah, there actually aren't any of those funds. I mean, I guess the fundamental point is, even to the extent that there's been a slight change in the reduction in revenues, we're still not in an operating balance. So there's no new money to spend, even if we wanted to. We will just hopefully be reducing the amount of one-time revenues that we're using to draw down upon, and we have to. So we're not even at the new normal yet. And so as we, I'm proud of what we as an organization and what we as a community have done. We are not there yet, and I think it's very tempting to say, well, we finally tapped the bottom and now we can jump back up to the surface, and we're not there. I mean, we're at the bottom and we're kind of stuck there for the moment, and so additional structural changes in our costs and our revenues have to happen because we don't have those one-time dollars. They're one-time by definition, so we're not going to have those. So additional reductions systemically must happen in the organization. That's the hard reality, that the new normal is not fully accomplished yet. We've gotten a long way, but we're not there yet. And it is because of both the labor organizations and individual employees, both those who are here and those who are not any longer. The business community here, we've had very few business fails. Compared to some other jurisdictions in the region that just went retail crazy during the boom and put a little mall in every other corner. We don't have that, and partly as a result, there have been many fewer both retail and non-retail business closures in the city, and it's one of the reasons why our sales tax revenue has it's declined. It's not fallen through the floor as it has in some other jurisdictions, and our residents and businesses keep shopping here and support their businesses, and they're out getting a piece of pizza or buying their gas here or whatever, just to both because they're great places to shop, but also because they want to support the local economy. The public has been a major partner in this work. In some other places in the region, people have they've gotten up in arms over a reduction of a half an hour in a park service or something. And here in the community, folks, look, we get it. We're living it too. We're dealing with a layoff, or somebody cut my hours back at work, or my house is in foreclosure, whatever it might be. We get it. And so the public's been very tolerant of both, all these reorganizations and stuff, but more fundamentally, because hardly any citizens deal with government, in that way on a day-to-day basis, with just the little things. Okay, we're gonna do some of these maintenance things slightly less frequently than we used to, and we may have a little bit less in the playbook for activities this year. Maybe the pool closes a little early, and you're like, God darn, that's annoying. But then you remember, and residents in this community have remembered, it's the same thing that they're dealing with in their daily life. It's just happening in the city. We're managing it the best that we can, but that only works because there is the whole community has understood that this notion of a little bit of shared sacrifice spread all around is the only way that we can get through it. And nobody has said, well, just eliminate, close fire stations so I can keep my pool open longer, or vice versa. There's a recognition that it takes everybody in the community needs to be thriving together. So I think that's really important. The other is there is a lot of luck involved, right? As you make these self-congratulatory presentations about how wonderful you are and your staff and the council and the community and employees, all of which is true for the most part. There's also luck in that many of these other cities that have gone to bankruptcy or close to it have had an unfortunate lawsuit against them where they have a big judgment or something. Things happen. And so it's not. We've set ourselves up to be lucky. There's certainly part of the point here, and the reason for maintaining a reasonable reserve is that so that we could weather those sorts of circumstances. And so, while we could not handle a $100 million judgment against us, I don't know who could. We've tried to plan for the fact that we won't always be as fortunate as we have relative to some other jurisdictions in the state. That said, we do have, in addition to the structural problem that we still have, there are big threats. One we've talked about at the council many times, which is this lag. I hope everyone is correct that the next problem we're going to have to deal with is that more money is coming in the door, and we're just going to have to resist the urge to spend it. Because what I fear is that what's going to happen next is that more service demands are going to come through the door without the revenues for years after that. That as folks start to move back in, as residents, not investors or others, move into houses again that are already built, and so our service demands will go up as people, they call the police, they call fire, they use the roads and all of that. Our demands will go up. We will get virtually no additional revenue just because of the way that Prop 13 works. And so the cap on the amount of revenue can fall much faster than it can go back up. But service demands will fall and rise as they fall and rise. There's no constitutional prohibition against somebody needing a police officer to come to their house if something goes wrong when they move in. That's just that you can't cap that. And so our first challenge is going to be the lag in increased service demand is going to be compared to when we'll start to see an uptick in revenue. So I think that being prepared for that, again, is one reason for a reserve. It's one reason for being as fiscally conservative as possible, is that we've got to be ready when that moment happens. The answer can't be, we don't have enough money to provide those basic services. We have to be prepared to do that. Second is this levy problem that we talked about earlier. That's not a short-term problem. It's not that we're out of money, but if in the long run we're not able to get these crediting issues taken care of, we either don't have enough money for a federal match, years into the future once they get through the authorization and appropriations process, which is a long ways away, but it's still there. Or we don't get the appropriation and we have to make more and more of those improvements ourselves. That's going to be a huge cost. So in many other cities, people would just say, well, that's 8, 9, 10, 20, 30 years out from here. But since Mr. Kristoff served 25 years, I've served 16, Mr. Villegas 10. That doesn't seem impossible. And I think we recognize that we have to be attentive to even what sound like long-term issues. We have to start solving them today, and so that's definitely a threat as well. And then the last is the economic development threat, which we don't have without redevelopment and with a much smaller organization, our capacity to spur economic development as a city government is dramatically reduced. We don't have the slack in the organization that allows you to sort of, if an opportunity comes up, if an IKEA comes up, we can say, okay, we're gonna put 2 people right on this, and hey, IKEA, they're going to just be working with you, and nobody else. They're going to make this project happen, which makes total sense for us economically, because long-term IKEA more than pays for that in a week of sales tax revenue. But it requires that your organization isn't living right at the bone, and we are right at the bone right now, where we've got staffers who are doing entirely different things than they trained for. That they dreamed their careers would be. They thought they were going to be a land use planner, and now they're a wastewater treatment plant operator, or whatever it is. They're already stretched both in time and in expertise, and so we just don't. Recognizing that we don't have the staff capacity to be as opportunistic, and we don't have the ability to use people in the areas where they have already developed the expertise and talent that would make them the strongest in some of those areas. Is going to put us. It only is not crippling us right now because it's happened to everybody else, but we in our team need to figure that out. How do we build that back so that we're top of class in the key areas that we need to be in order to be really strong economic development players. And I think we've got some of the DNA to make that happen, but it has to be a focus. It doesn't just happen on the natural. So I think it's a good report, and I do appreciate Mr. Ledesma asking that this come back outside of the budget process in a more comprehensive way, so that both we and the public can take a look at it in a different way. The one question I do have for those financial reports, I would love to see, if Nitish or somebody could take a look, if any of the 9 cities in bankruptcy also won the financial statements awards.
17 years in a row?
Well, not 17 years in a row, but I'm always a little skeptical of these industries awards to ourselves. But just to see how predictive is it really of sound financial management.
We'll report back to you.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
All right, item 13 is preparation activities for the 2013 strategic planning session. Mr. Tuttle.
Well, Mr. Mayor, Council, this evening has been very helpful from a strategic standpoint. The Port Commission talked about the business plan, and the finance staff just prepared, I think, a great overview in terms of where we are from a budget standpoint. I wanted to thank those who left, Paul, Nitish, and John Perry, as well as Carol, in terms of the work on that presentation. Was very helpful. We are now getting ready for the Council's 2013 strategic planning retreat on January 28th through the 30th, and kind of working back from that date on some really key inputs into that process. I wanted to go over a couple of key items, get your input, whether or not we're on track or not. This will be my first planning session with you. We'll bring back Lyle Sumek, who's worked in, I think, over a decade with the Council in terms of setting the strategic direction each year. Lyle will be back, and I will meet with him on Monday down in Phoenix at ICMA. But one of the thoughts that we had as a management team was to try to really take advantage of the staff input. Staff, as has been represented tonight, is definitely being pushed hard in different directions. We're going to do an employee survey, propose to do one on October 19th. Just prior to that, we'll meet with all of our managers, talk about the survey. We're going to try to replicate one that was done in 2009, so we can use 2009 as a benchmark in terms of employee morale and so on. But I think in terms of the Council strategic planning objectives, we're going to ask the employees of the city, what do they see as the pressing strategic issues for 2013, be able to draw that in so that as the management team gets together at our retreat in December, that we have the benefit of all of our employees' input. Our managers will really impress upon the importance for our employees to participate in that survey so we can get as close to 100% participation as possible. We'll have a lot of different opportunities for them to provide input on their particular expertise, and then have sort of a catch-all where they can comment on the overall city's priorities, as well as their own individual thoughts on their management and employee morale in the organization. So that will be a key input for us in December. We'll pull that together and work closely with you on the agenda for your January retreat. So that is sort of the broad overview, and I'd be curious if you had any additional input for the process. So, okay. All right.
Well, just overall broad comment, and that would be one of the areas I'll be focusing on is economic development. What kind of economic development is eventually going to take place now that the governor has vetoed two major bills that they weren't the greatest in the world, but at the same time there was a way in which we would be able to we would be able to at least put some kind of economic development plan together. Whereas what seems to be happening now is we have such a small, paltry sum of money that we are going to get each year that we're not going to have the ability to really go out and bond it. And I'd also like to even tie into what's happening with this oversight committee. I mean, it seems like every time the oversight committee takes an action, Department of Finance or somebody else that has more authority, they undo it. I mean, there's something structurally wrong with all of that. And so, I mean, I'd like to get, management's ideas, concepts, and is there a strategy that we can put together so that we just continually don't get frustrated? Okay?
And that would
be one area that I would head with Lyle and see if there's a way to.
And looking at the past work on the community investment plan and see what revisions could be made in light of the recent vetoes and so on.
Yeah, I'd like to know where we can go. I mean, I realize that, Measure G is going to be somewhat helpful, but at the same time, the opportunity to do things that we did when we had the agency is just, I mean, it's out there. It's not even close. We can't come close to it. But I thought with an infrastructure bank or something like that, we would be able to at least accumulate funds at a little bit faster rate so that we had the ability to go out and bond. Now it seems like we don't even have that ability. And so, what is going to be our overall philosophical approach to development? Is it the developers are going to have to put in all the infrastructure, acquire the land, and do all of the things? Or we have to wait for that developer to come on board? Or is there something that we can do to stimulate, to help? And with, a little tiny bit of a few pennies out there, guess what? That's not a lot of help. So anyway, that's some of the frustration that I'd like to take a look at.
All right. Council calendar, Mr. Richardson.
Yes, very quickly, Mr. Mayor. On the 13th of October, that Saturday is a busy day for the community. There's not on the calendar is the fire department is going to be coordinating a flu shot clinic at Westmore Oak School. It's the Old River City High School from 9 to 3. The financial planning seminars, this will be second year, I believe we've been doing that, will be here in the Galleria. And then the real popular open house at Fire Station 45 will take place that day also.
Any questions on the calendar? City manager report?
Just briefly, Mr. Mayor and Council, we handed out a summary of the bills that we tracked in this past legislative session. It includes the infrastructure financing bills that were vetoed. If you're interested, we could bring back our state lobbyists and do an overview of the session and what is the look ahead in 2013, if that is of interest.
You want to put us in depression?
It might. I think we'd be hopeful. Also wanted to mention what the mayor stated at the beginning of the meeting in terms of the commission appointments. A letter is going to go out. The city clerk is preparing a letter going out advertising the availability of appointments and that process that occurs in November, something that is done on a regular basis. The federal lobbyist interviews will occur on October 17th. And Carol's working with Bill Panos on that. And as I mentioned earlier, I will be in Phoenix next week for the ICMA conference Monday through Wednesday.
City attorney report.
I don't have much to report. I usually don't. But Marty asked me to mention, if you weren't aware, that the League of Cities and a couple of cities filed a lawsuit, the latest in a series of lawsuits challenging some of the provisions in 1484. By my count, that brings to a total of about 17
Which is the
lawsuits.
redevelopment trailer bill?
Yes,
Right.
sorry, the redevelopment trailer bill. There are about 17 lawsuits pending at the moment. This is a little more focused attack, generally aimed at the provisions that allow the state to take sales tax and property tax from communities if they're not satisfied with the way they've addressed some of the provisions in the redevelopment dissolution bills. Also some of the provisions that, in the view of the League, grant Department of Finance fairly unfettered discretion in how they implement this legislation. Difficult to say whether there's much prospect of success on that, but we'll be watching it and see, report if anything interesting develops.
All right, staff direction from members of the council. We have no future agenda item requests or motion to adjourn. It's been moved by Mayor Pro Tem Villegas, seconded by Mr. Christoph. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. And opposed, hearing none. Motion carries unanimously. Meeting is adjourned.